Battle Talent is a game that kind of appeared out of nowhere for me. I first heard about it from a comment on one of my community posts, and after looking into it more, it seemed right up my alley. VR combat, love it. Roguelike, love it. I literally have over 1,000 hours in the Binding of Isaac. On paper, it should be my perfect game. So why did I request a refund for it? Let's get into it. Battle Talent is a physics-based VR fantasy combat game with a few different game modes. The main two are the main story mode, quote unquote, where you work through levels and gradually unlock skills and weapons. The second mode is where the more roguelike elements come in. You start off at the beginning of a procedurally generated dungeon with a random weapon, and slowly work your way through it, collecting more items and perks as you go. Like I said before, on paper this game should have been perfect for me. I should have been able to sink hours into it without even realizing time has gone by, because it's literally the perfect mix of the games I love. Maybe I had unrealistic expectations for it from the get-go, but let's get into some of the reasons I don't enjoy it that much. You guys know by this point that I love Blade and Sorcery. It hands down has the best melee combat out of any VR game ever made. So, coming into Battle Talent, a game that tries to do a lot of the same things, well, Battle Talent is a game with physics that aren't as good as Blade and Sorcery's, combat that's not as responsive or satisfying as Blade and Sorcery, movement and controls that aren't as intuitive as Blade and Sorcery, climbing and parkour systems that aren't as fluid as Blade and Sorcery. You get the point. Now, admittedly, I may be a little biased. Blade and Sorcery is one of the first VR games I played years ago on my friend's HTC Vive back in like 2018, and it's my favourite VR game of all time. I think I've just been spoiled and gotten too used to how it works, but at the same time, the only things that Battle Talent has over Blade and Sorcery is more diverse enemies, progression and skills, and I guess a change of scenery? And while those are pretty big things that Blade and Sorcery has been sorely missing, they're all about to be fixed this year when it comes out of early access and Crystal Hunt is introduced. I've heard a lot of talk about how Battle Talent is a much more finished game than Blade and Sorcery, more polished, and people complain that Blade and Sorcery is taking so long to come out fully. I get the frustration with the latter. It has been almost 6 years since the game came out, but all it takes is following the roadmap and updates to see where they're up to and what is taking so long. The team is very dedicated to putting out a polished product, and they aren't a massive studio. A lot of people love Battle Talent, and I don't want to take that away from anyone. If you like the game, play it. Don't let me tell you otherwise. Coming from my perspective, I just think a lot of the core game itself is just a worse version of what we already have in Blade and Sorcery. I want to take a second to thank my Insane Person members, Alias and Waluigi. You guys are crazy for spending that much on me a month. Also, a massive thank you to all my other members. Every single dollar goes towards this being my career someday, and I can't thank you all enough for making that a possibility. If you would like to become a member from $1 a month and get all these benefits, consider pressing the join button next to the subscribe button down below. Now let's get into the nitty gritty a little more. Why don't I like the combat? First things first, let's go over the responsiveness of it. In Battle Talent, weapons do the same damage no matter how hard you swing it, and the only difference in damage is based on where you hit them. For instance, hitting someone in the body or the leg is going to do less damage than hitting them in the head. When you hit enemies, there's no real satisfying sound or visual effect or physical feedback at all. It feels too cartoonish and floaty to me. Compare that to Blade and Sorcery. Its combat just feels more tangible, more visceral. There's a sound stinger that plays sometimes when you kill an enemy. There's more crunch and squelch and other sounds and feedback. And even if you don't like how Blade and Sorcery feels to play, you can make it even more satisfying with just a couple mods, and if you think things are too weighty, you can change it in the sandbox settings or download mods to make things feel lighter. I don't want to base the game's merit over things the community has improved and not the developers, but The moddability of Blade and Sorcery is a huge benefit. Insane weapon packs, maps, overhauls, everything you could imagine is open to the Blade and Sorcery community, making a great game even better for completely free. From what I've seen, Battletalent just doesn't have that level of community activity. Next problem with the combat: taking damage. This could definitely just be a skill issue on my part, but a lot of the time I feel like parrying doesn't work how it should. And when you take damage, especially from multiple enemies at once, you can get stun locked, which can lead to you getting hit over and over again with nothing you can do about it. This is annoying enough in flat screen games like Dark Souls when it rarely happens, but when you're in VR and you feel like you should be able to do something but you just can't, when you feel like you're physically in that space, it can take away from the immersion a lot. When it comes to the physics, it just seems too floaty for me personally. While Blade and Sorcery can feel a little too heavy sometimes, especially when it comes to one-handed swords, it still feels more satisfying and immersive compared to Battletalent. Not to mention that the movesets themselves in Battletalent kind of feel like half-cooked Dark Souls bosses sometimes. Look, I am fully willing to accept that I could just be wrong about everything I've said, and I think many of my personal issues are just not getting used to the mechanics of the game properly. But from my first impressions, the game is a little lackluster for me, which is a shame, because when I found out that this game was pretty much mixing two of my favourite types of game, I was super hyped to try it out. Go try the game for yourself, see if you like it or not. But me, personally, I'm gonna stick to Blade and Sorcery. Thank you all so much for watching. Sorry if it was a little negative, but a lot of people have been bashing Blade and Sorcery since this game came out, and I just can't see where it's coming from. I don't think Battletalent is a bad game by any means, but it's just not for me. Let me know in the comments if you like this style of content and want to see more, and I'll catch you all in the next one.